Welcome to Expose the Ice by the Crappie Chronicles, presented by Clam Outdoors.
Welcome back to another episode of Expose the Ice, powered by
Lithium.
Today we're talking weed bites and specifically how to find crappies in weeds.
With that, we've got clear water and dirty water vegetation. Oftentimes with clear water, you're gonna have weeds that go quite a bit deeper. It all depends off water clarity. So if you have like a 6-foot water clarity, you could probably expect weeds around 11 to 12 feet. And same with dirty water, if you have, a foot of water clarity, those weeds aren't probably gonna be much deeper than that 1 to 2 foot mark. And with that being said, not all weeds are created equal.
Yeah, we like to break these down into 3 different types of weeds. And the first one we like to talk about is coontail.
Yeah, and with coontail, it usually grows out quite a bit deeper. Obviously, it depends on water clarity, but coontail is a very bushy type weed. So oftentimes it is hard for them to live right in it. You'll oftentimes see them around it or on top of it.
Yeah, and milfoil is the second one. This one is a type of weed that can kind of last the whole ice season. It tends to be a lot taller, a little bit more sparse, so those fish can really hunt around in it versus using it as structure more like they do with the coontail.
Yeah, and last but not least, we've got cabbage. Cabbage is a very leafy weed. It also is great for them to hunt in, and you will find them inside of it as well. Unlike coontail, where they're going to be around it and on top of it, oftentimes with cabbage and milfoil, they'll swim through it and use the lanes in it as hunting avenues and highways, really.
Yeah, and the bigger leaves of that cabbage can be really good throughout the rest of the year as well, but that big tobacco leaf type cabbage is what we really look for. It's hard to find it if you're just looking through the, down the hole or whatever, but if you have an underwater camera, that can be an awesome tool to find these weeds. And realistically, the biggest thing is being able to identify these weeds when you do find them or if it comes up on your jig.
Yeah, and another thing that makes finding these weed flats easier is going to be the One Boat Network.
And the cool thing about the One Boat Network app is this year we're giving away a 1-year subscription during every single episode. So if you want a 1-year subscription to the One Boat Network app, like, comment, subscribe, do all those things on these videos, and we're going to get you in there to enter to win a 1-year subscription to this.
So with the One Boat Network app, we have a big weed flat here. And what you'll notice about this weed flat is you have 2 big high spots. With weeds, anytime you have an area of difference that's on the bottom, that's going to really be your highway of where you're going to pinpoint a lot of these fish. There are areas of difference. So right here you have 2 big high spots, and then you have a deeper depression in the middle with a little high spot in the center as well. With this area of a little bit more depth is probably going to be the area that I focus on. That, and same with the edges of it as well. So what we'll probably do is grid out this whole deeper section right here. Obviously you do have weed lines where you have inside turns and you have points, but oftentimes these bigger, deeper sections of weeds are going to be quite a bit better. Granted, how you know there's weeds there does depend a lot on water clarity and simply just drilling holes to find out where they are.
Right, and scouting can be an awesome tool here too. If it's a lake that you spend time on in the open water season, just make mental notes of where those weeds are and what types of bottom is there. Weeds like to grow in soft bottom areas. If you have a lot of areas of sand and gravel, they typically don't grow a ton of different types of vegetation, and you're not going to want to focus on those. But areas that have kind of more muddy bottoms, especially in those shallow portions of the lake, tend to grow thick weed beds.
Yeah, and with that, with your One Boat Network and your Lake Master mapping, utilizing your depth highlights is a huge key with weeds. Once you find the depth ranges that the weeds are, you can simply just adjust your water level highlight area, and depending on if it's, you have multiple different types of weeds, some grow deeper than others, and you might find fish on different ones. So utilize both highlights. That can be very beneficial. Right here, again, you can adjust your depths on the highlights and your colors as well to know which is which. So oftentimes we will change it according to what the weeds are. Right here we have a depth highlight going around the edge, and then we have one where the weed line stops. So we have a shallower or shallow water highlight as well. This one is usually a 0 to 10. This really pokes out those very shallow areas, and it allows you to see those holes a little bit easier, and same with the edges of it.
Yeah, and weed bites can be difficult to pin down, especially on large expansive weed flats. We still like to focus on the edges, but it can happen out in the middle of them too.
As we talked about before, knowing different types of vegetation and being able to look at your depth highlights are huge when you're out looking for weed bites. Another thing is going to be looking for the vegetation transitions. So when we say that, that could mean multiple things. Obviously, it's weeds to no weeds. It can be deep to shallow, but it can also be from coontail to cabbage or milfoil to coontail or whatever that is. You are looking for changes in the weeds. That's how you're going to find these fish. So Griff, when we're looking for these changes, what are we looking for, especially during the day?
All right, so in the daytime, a lot of times, you're not gonna wanna get too shallow like up in here, because you're probably just your weeds are gonna get so matted out. So what typically I do is I run the edges of these weed flats. This would be a really good spot because you got this big inside turn coming in here. These fish can push bait up into there, use the weeds to their advantage. And then if you can find hard spots inside these weeds where the weeds actually won't grow, those fish will use that like a travel path from going to weed clump to weed clump. They'll actually swim in these openings, and you can basically set up in those openings and they'll just keep traveling through your area.
Yeah, and a good example of this is season 1, episode 7. This is a 24-hour episode. I really wish we would have spent all 24 hours in this one area we found. It was basically a sand spot on top of a point.
On. All right, so I just caught this one. It's about a 12-incher. It's lean and long, but we lost a couple there. It's like, what, like 6:30 or something like that. And this is the same spot where we caught all those dinks before. We came back and the bite was like totally different. Now all the fish, like, they won't commit to the bait, but the past like 15 minutes we've starting to get a couple of bites. So I'm gonna let this one go, but I think it might start to happen here. It's like gonna start getting light in the next hour, and I think we're gonna have like a short little window here where we might be able to catch some more. So we're getting a little bit of action, but that's the first one that wasn't a total dink, so super stoked.
I don't know. Oh God, yeah. Oh God, yeah. Big, big. Yeah. Well, we got ourselves a good one finally. Man, that is a pretty fish. We're Pink's grabbing the bump board right now, and yeah, this one I marked it, disappeared. Dropped down there with a snowdrop actually, and a couple waxies. Actually, I got the line just absolutely tangled around the deucer and it broke off. I can't even explain how much this fish means right now.
Basically, if you were to like look in here, there was just one bare spot and fish were swimming through it all night. So that's a very good example if you want to kind of see a different relation for weeds. And speaking of night bites, like we've mentioned, night bites tend to be weed bites. That's where they tend to go down. You see a lot of permanent shacks out in the basin. Everyone's hanging out overnight. That doesn't really seem to be where the bite is. Those fish push bait up into the weeds. So when you're getting out after work, what you want to plan for is you kind of want to go to an area where you think they're going to come feed. That's what's happening in weed bites. So you need to set up in areas that they're going to be pushing bait, right Griff?
Correct.
So
Correct.
like you kind of talked about for day bites, where would people or fish push bait up, and what areas would people look?
I like these kind of neck down areas where, you know, there's 2 high spots and then a little bit of a deeper water. And what they'll do at night is they may be out here during the day on these little edges, and then at night they'll just start to push that bait up here on top of this flat. And then once they get them up there, you know, they'll start just chasing them around in there. So yeah, if you can really see these like funnels, like these fish can just swim right up there, push everything right in there. And it's like a highway for them. They just kind of go right up in there and start feeding it at night.
Yeah, and you want to be positioned where they're coming to. Don't try to chase them. It doesn't work out too well.
Yeah, they move rather fast.
Yes, does not work out well for you. But a good example of one of these hot spots that we ended up finding and setting up for at night, and it just became a huge buffet line, was when we were in Maine. So that would be season 3, episode 12. It was a sunset feeding frenzy. We had a bunch of perch and crappies just slam a bunch of bait up into a weed patch, and we had a lot of fun.
Luke, would you grab that drone before it... What the f just happened? That's what I thought happened. There's a brick. Look at that. He ate it on the fall. Literally ate it on the fall.
Oh, that's why. Babalooey. I like that. Pinner minner. It's there. It's in there. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Stud.
That's 14, 15. No. Hey, bring the board.
13 maybe.
It's just they're so big.
Yeah.
Oh, look at his mouth. Transducer for.
It's another good one.
How big that crappie is.
Come on. You get him? Yeah. Now we're talking. Boom. Another stud right there.
You probably need my keys. Oh, you're going to get that. Okay, I was gonna say you're gonna need my keys. This one's a crappie. Oh no, he's a crappie. Look at that. Boom, another nice eater. We're gonna be eating good tonight.
So when you get to weeds, technology is obviously a huge topic. With the FLX30, something great you have is being able to adjust your settings. So the biggest thing is you're gonna wanna use a higher frequency when you're in weeds because that shrinks your cone angle down. So you wanna be able to shoot your transducer through different weed patches to find these fish. Also, you're gonna tend to be shallower, so you're gonna wanna be in low power mode, and that's how you're gonna wanna set up your Vexilar for this type of fishing.
Yep, and then the other tool that is probably one of the most beneficial one is a camera, because then you can see what color, how the weeds look, if they're green, if they're dying. So you drill until you can see until you start to see the right combination, and then you go ahead and start using your Vexilar and just start working the area and start catching them.
And you can use forward-facing sonar for this approach, but kind of like Griff and I have said,
it's a weed finder basically.
Yeah, it's a weed finder. You're spending $2,000 or $3,000 on something that you point, and you go weeds, and then you put it away, and you grab a camera.
But it does help, you know, when you're out there, you can kind of tell where the thicker stuff is, but to find fish in it, it's basically useless unless you put it in down view, but rarely do that.
And then you're not moving fast enough. So that tends to be what you're looking for. Now we're going to dive into baits and tactics.
And with weed bites, you have a bunch of different rod and reel selections. You have finesse and power setups for both. One of our good finesse options that we have is going to be GRIFF's Chronicle. This rod we use a lot during the day. It's very good with 4mm and 3mm jigs. It has a lot of control to it and a lot of finesse to it.
Yeah, and we pair that up with a schoolie reel. It's really the only reel that we use with this rod. It's a perfect combination for fishing those smaller baits and fishing in those weed bite situations.
Yeah. We also have another finesse option being Bart's Chronicle. This rod is going to be a carbon blank with a nice long spring tip on it. This gives you a lot of feel, and so oftentimes at night bites, if you don't have a headlamp on, you can oftentimes miss bites, but not with this rod because you can feel everything.
Yeah, and this reel, again, we like on this rod all the time running that Clam Elite Spooler on there. It's just a dynamite reel, works in pretty much every situation. Even in deeper water, you can just peel that line off really fast.
Now we'll get into the power setups. We have Waldo's Chronicle. This rod is a great noodle rod, and it's really good for fishing in the weeds because of the backbone it has. Oftentimes when you're fishing like coontail or milfoil, you need to get them out of the weeds quick before they bury. So this has the backbone to do so.
Yeah, and again, that Clam Spooler Elite on there is an awesome reel. You can just winch those fish right up with that thing with that 2-to-1 gear ratio in there. You could also try a spinning reel on here. We prefer it with this setup right now, and I think we're just going to keep sticking with that. We all like it a lot.
And last but not least, we've got Pink's Chronicle, the whoop and stick of our lineup. This one has a ton of power to it. It is still very parabolic, so it keeps fish pinned. We love using this on iFish Pro setups and tip-up setups when we're out covering weed flats. So we'll use these as dead sticks, but also we love using the blade jig with this. It's just got a lot of power. It's nice and long for hole hopping, and it really gets them out of the weeds quick.
Yeah, and we like the spinning reel on this. This is a Tatsumi on here, a little bit bigger reel, picks up line a little bit quicker. So when you do get a bite, especially when those fish are aggressive and they're knocking slack in your line, you can pick that up quick, set the hook, and you're right in the game. But yeah, again, this rod you can really pair with any reel that you'd like, but we love it with the Tatsumi on there. The Katana is also a great option for
It's
this.
just such a smooth setup. Baits, we've got pinheads. Those are just a staple anywhere we go. They get down quick, they catch fish. They're just really, really hard to beat.
Yeah, we like that 16th and the 1/8 ounce size in those pinheads. They're really, really great. The 1/8 is a nice one, especially to start off the day with. Fire it down. It gets down quickly. You can determine if those fish are aggressive or not. And if you have to downsize, you can always go to the 16th.
Yeah, and they have some really good glow colors as well, pretty much in all their baits for fishing at night, which is huge for us. And we like to dip them into the Vexilar glow ring to give them a nice charge. But yeah, definitely those pinheads are a must-have. Next, we're going to have our tungsten and plastic combinations. As always, drop kicks and drop XLs are going to be our go-to. We always start out with a 4 mil. Oftentimes, weed bites, we do go up to a 5 millimeter just because fishing low light conditions and at night, that bigger profile makes it a little bit easier for them to see. We'll pair it up with a Jamie XL plastic or even a Mackie Mackie, both in glow, just so it's easier for them to see and find.
Yeah, and with a lot of these different bites that we're talking about, especially with the weeds, it might seem like we're really don't have a very wide selection of baits, but that's because we've really set this up to be a system where we're using certain baits with certain rods to catch certain fish. So we don't vary too much from our pattern really because it just flat out works. But this last one we're going to talk about is something that, you know, we don't do too often, but there's a time and a place for it, and when it works, it frickin' works.
It's one of my favorite techniques by far, and we figured this out about 3-4 years ago in weed bites at night, and it's the deal.
And this is the blade jig. So this is a nice little jig here. We literally use this one white with the silver back on it, and it does glow as well. This is an awesome sunset bite type of situation, even at night too. It can turn a day where you're having a lot of lookers turn into a lot of biters with this. Now the thing with this type of jig is that you got to pair it up with a piece of meat. This jig alone doesn't do the job. And what we like to put on there,
Big old fat.
whoa,
You know.
just a big old fatty. And the bigger the better, realistically.
Yeah, it definitely is. We hook it right under the dorsal, and when that bait falls, it completely flutters down.
And they hammer it. They eat it up.
Just like that. So, a couple additional products that you might want. Vexilar glowing, fishing at night. You want to always glow your baits. It's definitely a must-have for that. It's very easy to just drop it down, and it doubles as a rod holder. So we definitely like to utilize that product. Another one is going to be during the day an underwater camera. And you can use your camera of choice. There's a lot of great options out there. And it just makes finding fish in weeds that much easier because sonar can't shoot through weeds.
Right.
So you only get half the story half the time.
Yeah. And the other thing we like to use is some type of tip up. We love these iFish Pros. The cool thing about a weed bite is sometimes it's kind of hard to get on the fish specifically, and here we can have 2 lines per person. So while we're out there jigging around, we can leave some set lines around to really try to hone in on where these fish are at.
Yeah, plus they move a lot. So every once in a while, the school will move towards their set lines, and we'll pop a couple extra holes around there to get a couple more fish.
Yeah, and one other easy thing that you can use is a headlamp. It seems super easy, and you'd think, oh, of course, that would be, you know, something you'd have with you. But I can't think of how many times we've been out there, and it just kind of turned into a night bite scenario, and we weren't prepared for it.
Yeah.
But having that headlamp can mean everything between staying out there and getting on those fish and having to pack up and get out of there.
Yeah, and last but not least, a good base camp. We like to set up a hub house when we're on weed flats. Typically, we'll put it right in the middle of the flat, and that is our central area where we keep all of our gear. Oftentimes at night, you can lose stuff because everything's spread out everywhere. So we like to have that one central command post, not only to warm up, but keep all of our gear in one central location.
Yeah. So out of all that stuff, I know it was a long list, but fishing weed flats can be super fun, and I hope this helped you break down weed flats and helping you find some crappies in the weeds. So until next time, this has been another episode of Expose the Ice.